Hello, everybody. Happy Sunday. If you haven't been here before, this is a live stream where I talk about nothing but what's happening in the real estate market. And if you haven't read the headlines this week, they are kind of crazy. We have China with Evergrande, and we have the government talking about the debt ceiling, and we have a special guest this week who is somebody that you guys all know and love if you watch any real estate channel, Jeb Smith. And Jeb Smith is going to give his insight of what he thinks is going on with Evergrande and China, and if it's going to be impacting our housing market. Only time will tell, but I would love to hear what Jeb has to say. At any time during the stream, you can always put in your questions for Jeb and I by putting the word question first, and then put your question, and then Jeb will go ahead and answer it, and I will answer it as well. Mr. Jeb Smith, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing awesome. I appreciate you having me. Happy Sunday to everyone out there. I didn't realize we were going to come on and talk housing. I thought we were just going to talk about just fun things, nothing to do with housing, just what's going on in each other's lives, and just chit chat, just catch up.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if you wanted to talk about my new mascara. I really like it.
No, not today. Yeah,
Not
we'll
today.
talk about housing. We'll give our take and see what people think. I know there's a lot of different opinions out there, but of course I have mine, so we'll see what people think about it.
Oh, well, there's been several articles and news stories that have come out, coming out of China with Evergrande, which is a big company, much like Morgan Stanley or some of those other big conglomerates. And it's talking about how this could be crippling to the Chinese market and how it could affect other housing markets throughout the world, not just the United States. And if you could pull up that article really quick so we can highlight that really fast, why China's Evergrande crisis could be worse than the U.S. crash, with 30% of its GDP at risk. China's economy is more vulnerable to real estate bust than either Americans or Japan's when the bubbles burst. We were talking about this a bit. You've read this article. This is from fortune.com, if anybody was wanting to know. And it says the world is anxiously watching the Chinese housing market in a wake of a developer China Evergrande Group's potential default. Market watchers have been drawing comparisons to the U.S. housing crash in 2008, and even some Japan's property bust two decades ago. But although there are similarities, China's situation is fundamentally different from either of those two episodes. The most obvious comparison for the potential Chinese real estate crash is the U.S. housing that burst after the fall of the Lehman Brothers. By now, we know that the land bubbles are especially, oh my God, what is that word? Pernicious, since they involve so much debt when they pop, and they tend to take a financial system down them, causing lenders to put back fear into insolving and liquidity. All right, my friend Jeb, we talked a little bit about this a little bit ahead of time. So give me your perspective of what you think is going on with this particular situation with China, and how do you feel like it's going to affect the U.S. housing market?
Well, yeah, I mean, you and I were talking a little bit before, and I was just kind of throwing my thoughts out there on it. And my beliefs are that China's been a facade for a long time, right? I mean, Chinese companies on the stock market, their financials aren't reported. There's just so many things that they do differently with regards to how they report things in China versus how we do it here in the U.S. Now, obviously, the U.S. has its own problems, but China, it's almost like they're hiding certain things in order to appear bigger, better, more financially sound. And again, you could compare that to the U.S. in some regard. But the main difference in China and how they do things versus the U.S. is we in the United States have the Fed, right? So if we need to print more money or we need to do something, we have a Treasury Department and things are done in a certain order. China, it's all done by the powers that be, right? They're basically I can't even think of the guy's name, Zai or whatever the president's name is over there. He essentially is the one that calls the shots, right? If they need more printing, they need more money. He basically just says, this is what needs to be done, and it's done. There's no voting on it. There's nothing more than a word spoken, and that's what happens. In this case, he said that essentially they're going to let it crumble to some extent, right? And I don't necessarily believe that to be the case. I just feel like there's too much on the line for them to actually allow that to happen. But even if that does happen, what they've said, at least in that article, is that any money that the company still has on its balance sheet or that they'll use to continue funding the projects and building out what they've already started. So I don't know how that happens over there is going to tie into the U.S. I mean, the U.S. right now, right, our housing at the moment is built on supply and demand, right? The reason our prices are higher, the reason that things have gone quote unquote gangbuster or so over the last 18 months has nothing to do with really any other country outside of the United States, right? It's a lack of something. A lot of people want it. A lot of people need it. First-time home buyers are becoming prime buying age. Baby boomers didn't sell their properties like a lot of people thought. There's just so many factors that are playing into why our house prices are appreciating. Now, there are other things financially that, in the United States that, aren't as financially sound, so to speak. But I don't think that what happens in China at the moment is going to have any sort of play on housing in the United States.
I agree with you on the fact that like China always likes to report things a little different than the rest of us. And I just can't see how with that Chinese market that they would not do exactly what we did, which is where we bailed out the banks.
Right.
And I know maybe the threat of not bailing them out is, trying to scare investors to reinvest in a lot of the loans that they have with that bank. I think that China doesn't want to look like a failure. So if they let this fail, it's going to allow for a lot of housing markets in their area to tank, and they don't want to look like a failure. So I'm sure they're going to just go ahead and pump money back in it. I agree with you on that. But we were talking about earlier is that the facade that they create with a lot of investment properties in China is that they have these fake housing developments. The
cities,
building,
an entire city, not just a building, it would be like Los Angeles, so to speak, all being unoccupied new construction properties with no one living in them.
Yeah, they're all sold to investment companies. They're sold to investment firms, investment companies. Now, they started that way back with the last housing crash. They were doing that, and then eventually they did fill back up. They filled up, but it took a while. They sat vacant for a long time, and there were foreign investors that were buying into these cities, thinking that they were buying into something good because they would even create almost like they would hire people to walk down the street so it looked like there were people living there. So when they were driving through, you can't stop here because it's still under construction, but people are still going about their day, but this is what it is. So basically what they were driving down the street that was just fake. I mean, you have fake vegetables, fake everything, right?
No, it's a facade. Right.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I mentioned earlier, right. I there's a lot of issues in the United States, right? I mean, we're running up on $30 trillion worth of debt. We're that at the end of the month, September 30th, we've got to either extend the debt ceiling, which ultimately has to happen. Obviously, there's going to be some bipartisan negotiation going on with a lot of things, but there's problems, right? And I mentioned we're building this sandcastle, so to speak, right, within the United States, and I don't think that housing is the problem here. It's the printing of all the money that's the problem, and people still need housing. People still need to live properties. Now, you don't necessarily have to invest in property, but if inflation is a real thing, which it seems to be heading in the direction that we're heading. Real estate is a fixed investment, right? I mean, you don't have to necessarily concern yourself about what happens in a year or two. If you're an investor and you can get a property and get, a renter in there and have fixed income coming in every single month, it's stable, right? It's the most stable investment in an inflationary environment. And so you can see why people want to invest in it. And you see a lot of the big funds, the big companies doing that sort of thing because it's controllable to some extent. And when you have a lack of it, and a lot of people that want it, it becomes more appealing. And so Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of things that could go wrong that could send waves going in a lot of different directions, but I don't think housing is the start of it, right? I think other things could lead to problems in housing, but even then, I don't think you're going to see a crash. I mean, I think if anything, you see more of a moderation.
Right. I say a flattening,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I totally lost that train of thought. I had it right in my head the whole time. I'm like, oh my gosh, I am concerned about the debt ceiling because the conversations back and forth from either side have not been necessarily diplomatic. We'll just put it
Yeah,
that way.
absolutely.
And so they're saying that they're not going to increase the debt ceiling, but this is not something that is like a new thing. Like it happens often. And they have been saying, Janet Yellen has been saying, we need to increase this since way before August. I think in the end of June, like we have to do this. And now they've run out of options to increase it. If that actually does happen, yes, we will have a housing crash, but we'll have a bunch of other problems going on in the United States other than housing.
At the end of the day, they don't have an option but to extend it. I mean, that's the reality. And they can sit here and play these games like they're not going to do it. They have to do it. It's just a matter of how they do it, what party gets what passed as part of an agreement to get it done. And that's where the sticking point is, right? Is that people want their piece of the pie, so to speak, as part of the agreements between both parties in order to make this happen. And that's where the whole political piece of the puzzles go. I mean, politics in itself, sorry if anybody out there is garbage. It's all about getting what you want out of the deal and never working with the other side. And it's always like that. And it's exactly what we're seeing at the moment. So
right. But when you're talking about investing in real estate and people talking about, oh, it's a terrible time to buy a house and all this other stuff, I always say there's a reason why big corporations buy houses during a market like this, because they're hedging their bets in a secure, hard asset
absolutely
like real estate. Yeah, that's exactly what they're doing. So when you're seeing all these big corporations buying single family dwellings, and they're not doing it to, for just to say I owned real estate, they're doing it to hedge their bets.
But they also see a population of renters coming up, right? They see a population of people, affordability becoming an issue, right? People not being able to actually buy housing. Even if you wanted to purchase a house, a lot of people out there want to own housing. Take everything else aside. They want to own a house.
Yes.
And financially, they would be okay with a certain amount of payment every single month in order to do that, but they can't qualify for a home or the type of property they want in their area. And so therefore, they're a renter, and they're going to be a renter. In an inflationary environment, guess what happens to rents? They go up.
And
these people have to rent.
Yeah.
And so when you've got 4 to 6 million homes, we're behind with regards to supply, and regardless of, I mean, whichever article you're reading, it could say 4, it could say 6 million behind, behind a new construction or what have you, in order to feed the population. You've got a growing population of people that need housing. So if they're not in a position to buy a house, they're going to have to rent. And so these corporations, like you said, are hedging themselves because they know affordability is a problem. You've got more people that are going to be renters. We're going to cash in on something that, is going to bring us a fixed return every single month over the next however many years.
But this isn't fixing the affordability problem.
Nope.
Because rent has gone up. So now all we're doing is creating more of a homeless population, or people that are like, there's so many people that are like, well, I'm just going to go ahead and renovate my van and live in the van. Young kids, like people that normally would have like a good tech job, decent tech job, starting out making pretty good money, still can't afford to buy a house. I mean, this is affordability crisis. I've been saying that for 2 years now. It's an affordability crisis, not a housing crash. I thought it was going to crash. I really did when all this started. And if they didn't keep extending those moratoriums, that we were going to have a big problem. But I mean, the unemployment rate right now is like, they can't get enough employees, and people are begging people to come work for them. And
well, here's the thing is like, I mean, a lot of and I have a different belief, so to speak, right? I mean, I feel like anybody that wants a job at the moment can get one.
Absolutely.
Okay. There's a lot of jobs out there. So anybody that tells me that employment is an issue, it's only an issue because people don't want to work, because there are jobs available. I've read, many articles. I've been into many restaurants where
begging
they're
for
trying to
employees.
hire people. And a lot of these companies, like for example, I read an article recently out of the Wall Street Journal. I don't remember the article. I can reference it at some point. This hotel was hiring housekeepers essentially, and they started paying $15 an hour. And what they said in the article is that the staff that was working there was really, really happy because their wages got bumped, almost double, if you will, but it attracted no new workers. So housekeepers, and I forget the market that it was, were earning $15 an hour in that market. And it kept the people on staff really happy, but no new workers came in as a result of that. And so, and it was almost like a double in pay, if you will. So there's a lot of companies out there looking to hire quality workers and paying for it, but they can't even get the people to come in. And so that's becoming an issue. And I read an article earlier today that said that part of it is, people retiring early. They just said, you know what, I'm done with this. Like, I don't want to work in this environment. So I'm not going to continue pushing on. If I was a teacher, a lot of teachers retired early because they were like, I'm not going to teach school virtually. I'm not going to wear a mask, here in California, like a lot of the teachers and stuff are still, I'm not going to do that. So, and therefore they say, you know what, I'm out, and they leave. And so that takes good quality staff, people that are, in decent wage earners out of the market entirely. And, a lot of these places are looking to hire them, but they just can't get the people to come in. So that's a whole different conversation.
That is a whole different conversation. All right. So we have some questions that have come in. We have given our viewpoints of what's happening with the avant-garde and the debt ceiling. That I think that's going to be the biggest issue if they don't get that taken care of. Dara says, question, do you think rural land homes built on rural land that are not in a master plan community or near a large metropolitan area will be more valuable in the future due to COVID craziness? That is a time will tell situation. Okay, so if you're moving to a rural area that has a rural track and it happens to be, 100 miles away from a major city and major hospital, you're not going to win on that. But if you happen to live like in a suburb that hasn't been developed of a city that is growing, it's like you won the lottery, but you're going to have to hold on to that. You're not going to flip it in 2 to 3 years. You're going to have to wait 7 to 10 to 15 years for that to turn into a real healthy profit for you when you buy those kinds of properties. I've done that. I did that here. This little area was just a little dot, and now it's grown up exponentially. They can't even keep up with how many schools they need. But you have to do a lot of due diligence ahead of time to find that perfect rural spot. What do you have to say, Jeb?
I think I think you've already seen a large percentage of what's going to happen in that market happen already over the last year, right? So you saw a lot of rural, not super rural areas, but more rural areas that haven't seen appreciation in 20 years appreciate more than in a year than they have in the last 20, because people were moving out of cities and moving to more rural areas to get away, to get land. I mean, look at Nashville, Tennessee, for example. Go on the outskirts, Franklin, outside of Nashville, and Montana, and some of these areas that people are just going in droves now because more land, better quality of life, the better quality of air if you're coming from LA or somewhere in California, just so many factors. I don't know if that can continue forever at that pace, but I think, there's something to be said about having, a slower pace and more room to breathe and run around and all of that good stuff. You're never going to see the appreciation like you do in some of the bigger cities, in my opinion. But, if you know that going in and know the reasons that you're buying it, then, that's to each his own, if you will. So, yeah.
I have a question for you.
Yep.
The appreciation, how much do you think that if someone was to have bought a house let's just say in the last 7 months, how much do you think that their home will appreciate within that year? What is your percentage?
So hold on. So they bought it. So are we moving forward, or are we saying what happened?
I say they bought it. They bought it in 2000, like right at the beginning of 2021. They just bought it in 2021. How much do you think they're going to have gained in value within that year?
In a rural market or any market?
Just in general, just in the average.
The annual appreciation over the last however many years is somewhere between like 3 and 5%. That's what's
Correct.
normal, right? And so we saw this craziness over, during the pandemic where it was double digits in a lot of markets and even high double digits in some markets. But I think you get back to the trend, right? You get back to somewhere between that 3 to 5%, I think is what's normal. And I think you're going to see that over the next 2 to 3 years. I don't think that's going away, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't see, there's no way we're going to be having these exponential.
No, you're not going to
35,
have the
25.
exponential. And you're going to see the median home price. It's going to go down at some point, right? It's not going to stay continuing rise. And people are going to look at that and go, well, the median price is going down, but you have to understand what that means and where it's coming from, how quickly we went up. There's some, retracement needed in order for stabilization. So.
Right. Well, it's gone a little too high for everybody's liking.
No, agreed. Yeah.
BB said, question, do you think that the lack of infrastructure will affect development in rural housing? What is your opinion, Jeb?
The lack of infrastructure. What do we mean by lack of infrastructure?
Roads, bridges.
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say, right? I grew up in a rural area. I grew up in rural North Carolina, small town, Kinston, 20-something thousand people in the middle of nowhere. I now live in exactly the opposite of that, right? I'm in Southern California. The population's huge. And so I don't know that that really, in my opinion, that never really affected housing back then. I think more of what you have now is just a lack of, say for example, in Southern California, right? Not a rural market, but what prevents building here? It's not infrastructure. It's merely land, right? So you don't have enough land in order to build properties out in a lot of these rural markets, where there's you have the available land. I think most of them have roads, they have water. So the infrastructure is there. It's a lack of, I don't know what prevents people from building in those areas. Maybe the distance to yeah, I mean, you can answer this better than I can. I mean, a distance to being so far from a city, and I honestly don't know.
This is going to depend on your area. And I'm going to tell you right here in where I live, we have a massive lack of infrastructure, and they have built neighborhood on top of neighborhood on top of neighborhood. And every time it rains, it literally shows what the lack of infrastructure can do to a community, because we have areas that have never flooded now flood because they didn't do a proper amount of drainage ponds. They don't have the right, and then the roads are deteriorating and quicker because you have more people that are driving on those roads. So what has happened in our area, this rural town, is they put a freeze. No more new home building. You can't put up a brand new neighborhood. Now, if you've already had it in the works, yes, you can continue and finish building your houses. But we have to get all this straightened out first because we have too many problems. We don't have enough schools. We don't have enough roads. The roads are in bad shape. We have to clean this all up first before we build any further. Yes, I do think that a lack of infrastructure does affect rural development. So
what happens here in California, and when I say California, people automatically think it's not rural, right? But a lot of what happens with new constructions, they start building further and further away from bigger cities, right? So they end up in the desert, right? And it's rural to some extent because it's in the middle of damn nowhere. But what happens there is California, they do there's an infrastructure tax, if you will, right? On top of the property taxes. These are bonds. It's Mello-Roos here in California is what it's called. And essentially the homeowners buying in that community end up financing the infrastructure of those schools, those parks, those roads, everything that's built out in that area is essentially financed over a period of 25 to 30 years, depending on the bond term, by the people buying there. You end up paying for it as part of the deal. And so, maybe that becomes something in other markets. If you don't already have that, is, what happens is when they build these new communities, in order to get the infrastructure there, other people end up paying for it, or the homeowners that are buying end up paying for it in order to build it out. So do you guys have something like that there?
No. Well, I mean, we've had a whole set of issues, but it's a lot of people that know somebody that get something pushed through that shouldn't have been pushed through. And so in order for everything to not be pushed through anymore, everybody just put a complete stop until we get it straightened out, until we figure out where the money's going. It just seems that the things that were supposed to go to certain projects. Why was this project that was estimated to be $74 million now over $175 million? What happened to that money? So they're kind of doing a back check to see where the money went and if we need to retrieve some of it from some of these projects to get all these other projects ahead of the game. Yep. So, all right. Do we have any more questions, Eddie, that you want to put up here? Shark Chucker. that was difficult. Shark Chucker said.
Shark
question.
Chucker. Shark Chucker. 3 times.
I'm not going to do it. That's not. Questions. What are the requirements to be considered a homestead? Every state's going to have something different with homestead. Here in Louisiana, homestead has to do with you can only have it on one property. It has to be the property that you live in, and we excuse $75,000 in tax. Everything your house valuation over $75,000 is the property tax. What is it in California?
Honestly, you stumped me. I don't know what the requirements are. I know it can only be on your primary. It can only be on one property. I don't know what the requirements are for it, though, to be completely honest. Yeah, I can find out, though. Here, you guys.
How much? How much is it for that? Like it's tax exempt for how much?
That I don't know. I have no idea. Yeah.
So it's 75,000 here. So you can actually get a house here. I think they even actually might have bumped it up recently, but you can get a house here if you bought one for 75,000, and if it's your primary residence, you don't owe poop on property taxes. Some other states too that people might want to look at is that if you're a veteran, they give you property tax relief for being a veteran. So if you are a veteran and you check in your local area, if they give you a extra tax exemption on your property taxes, because, of course you don't want to have to pay more than you have to. Look into that. That's a way to save some money.
In California, you actually don't have to file one. They did. It's automatic. But it says single homeowners receive 75,000 equity exemption. And then the other thing is, when your property's in a homestead, if a debt creditor comes after you or what have you, in the state of California, it's up to 600,000 of the home's equity cannot be touched by a judgment of creditors. So I could get deep into this thing, but I'm just reading some headlines at the moment. It's something we don't really talk about it much here in California because when you close on a property, it's automatic. So it's not really something that we ever discuss. I mean, I've owned property in Florida before, and I know in Florida you actually had to file one. You had to send in the paperwork. In California, you don't have to do that. You have to file here. It is a thing. The people that bought our last house did not file. And the only reason I knew that is because I had gotten like a notification about our property taxes. So I went and looked on the website, and I'm like, this guy didn't file. So I let his real estate agent know. I called her up and I'm like, he didn't file his property. Oh, here we go. Look at this. Eddie, you're gonna have to, my old eyes, you're gonna have to make this a little bigger for me. Please. It says as of 2021, the exemption covered value of 75,000 per individual, 100 per married couple, up to 175 for a disabled of those over 65. That's good though. 175,000 exemption from your property tax. I mean, how much? I mean, but a house in California for 175,000 doesn't even exist. Well, I mean, the nice thing about California too is that we have Prop 13, right, which keeps your property taxes essentially, where more or less where you purchase the property. Our property taxes can't increase in California more than 2% per year, right? Oh. So when you buy a property in the state of California, your property tax is basically 1% of the purchase price. Right. Okay. So you buy a $300,000 property, your property taxes are what, $3,600 a year. Right. Okay. And then from there, they can't so if your neighbor then sells their house for $600,000, your property taxes don't change based on where they sold their property. Your property taxes are essentially fixed based off what you purchased the property at, but they can increase, but no more than 2% per year. So what happens is you have people. And this goes back to 1978. This was filed back in 78. And it was basically to keep aging seniors, if you will, in their properties. Because what happens is they got to retirement age. They no longer had income coming in. Properties were increasing at such a crazy rate that their property taxes were going up. And so they did this as a way to fix that. Now, if that's why that over 65, that's why that number was 175, right? Because it says it. Yeah, honestly, like I don't know. I mean, I'm being completely transparent here. I don't know how the exemption actually works with the equity here in California with regards to a
Hmm.
homestead. I'm
Right.
only aware of the protection side with regards
Hmm.
to the creditor aspect.
Right.
I don't know that there is truly an exemption with regards to your property tax based on that, and unless it comes off. I don't know. I need to look into that because I mean, I've been doing real estate 20 years and that's never a question that has, that's come across
Huh.
with regards to
Well,
the exemption on taxes.
so a lot of states have a credit of like a tax exemption if you're over the age of a certain age. So check if you're concerned or you want to like save some money on your taxes, just go call your local tax assessor's office and say, hey, I'm over 65. Is there any kind of tax exemption for me?
Yeah. And
Um,
then what we also have too, Kristina, not to drag this on, is that in California, once you have your property taxes at that 1% of the purchase price, for example, say I bought a property, say I paid $50,000 for it 40 years ago, and I still own it today, and my property taxes are based off when I purchased it. So my tax base is really, really low. If I decide to sell that property, I'm over 55 years old, and I decide to sell that property and buy something of lesser value, I can actually take that property tax base to my new property.
mhm.
So
Well,
I
that's
can
great.
buy a property, say that $40,000 property I bought 50 years ago, whatever the number I used is now worth $1 million. I can now buy a property less than $1 million and keep that exact same tax basis from 40 years ago.
Oh my goodness.
It's pretty,
That's a good
it's
deal.
great. But it also, what it does is it puts an issue on people keeping their houses, right? You have people that don't want to sell their property and
Because of
upgrade
that.
because their property taxes are so low.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well, here in Louisiana, we do have something called you can freeze your property taxes when you're over a certain age. So if you're over that into that golden years, check it out. Go talk to your tax assessor's office, save yourself some money. All right. What's the next question, my friend Eddie? Eddie, the producer, who's also my husband extraordinaire. Anton says, hey guys, question. Home prices are super high. Homeless is up in many metro areas. Jobs are still far behind before COVID. Inflation is simply crazy. Are we expecting big things to happen soon? What is your opinion, my friend Jeb?
big things to happen soon. I don't think you're going to see. I mean, I don't know. I've been my opinion of everything has been pretty consistent for the last 18 months or so, with regards to this, and even before that, pretty consistent. I don't think you're going to see a lot of changes, right? I mean, at the end of the day, listen, our administration doesn't want to see big changes in either direction, right? Because big changes make them focal points in good or bad scenarios. So depending on, it doesn't matter who the president is, you don't like big changes for obvious reasons. So I don't know that any big changes are going to happen, but what you are going to see is, you're going to continue. You've got this debt ceiling thing coming up. That's going to be a position of that needs to be negotiated on, on both parties. And so from that, you're going to get probably additional debt that's added to our already massive, debt that's out there. We're again peaking $30 trillion, which I think is, I forget what, 7 times more debt than we've had in the I forget what the actual stat is, but it's massive. And so I think you're going to continue to get added debt. I don't think you're going to see much change on the housing front. I don't. I mean, I think
Not for a while.
you're leading into the time of year where things typically slow down. And that's going to happen this year. It's not going to be any different. You're going to get, the market is going to slow as you move closer to the holidays. It happens every year. So the real question is what happens at the beginning of 2022 in that spring market. If you see a huge slowdown then I think you're seeing a change in the environment. But if things start to pick up, then you're probably going to have a 2022, not similar to 2021, because that's a complete anomaly, but more typical of what you've seen in the past.
There would have to be a huge economic disaster. I mean, like, honestly, like there would have to be something that really shook up the real estate market for it just to plummet like tomorrow. There's just too much cash in the market right now.
And I believe, whatever, if something does happen in housing, it's going to be completely unrelated to housing.
Right. It'd be something else that affected it.
It's going to be something. It's going to be one of those black swan events that affects everything, including housing, not just housing. Right. Housing at the moment, well, a lot of people feel like it's completely unstable. It's been built at least over the last, couple of years on pretty stable soil with regards to the loans that are out there, the people that are buying them, that sort of thing.
Investment
So
firms buying
yeah,
them.
and at payments that are a lot less expensive in many markets than it is to rent. I mean,
Right now, especially.
So for me, for example, I live in Southern California. I bought my property, fortunately, in 2012, the one that I live in at the moment. And so if I were to go out and rent my property right now, I could rent it for about $1,500 more per month than my mortgage payment with my taxes and insurance.
Mhm.
Okay. So, and if I took that amount plus my mortgage right now, okay, and I went out and tried to rent something, I wouldn't, first off, there would be nothing out there for me to rent.
Mhm.
And secondly, it would suck. I mean, it would probably need a lot of work. It probably wouldn't be it would be in an inferior location to where I am at now. So there's just, it doesn't make sense for me. Right. I mean, me and my wife are looking for property, right? I'm looking to buy property.
A lot of investors are.
Yeah, I'm looking to buy things. And so if I were somebody that thought that there was this massive change coming, or if, there was something different happening, I would be putting my money in other places at the moment. And that's not what I see. So
I did see a super chat come in, Eddie. If you want to put that up on the screen, they always get priority here. He's going to stick it on out there. Eddie, the producer.
And one thing I will say, Kristina, too, not to jump back to that question, but inflation, right, is an issue.
Right.
And a lot of it is because we've been backed up on goods and services and things.
Supply chain issues.
Yeah. Like if you look off the coast of Huntington Beach right now, there's 50 ships out there, the most we've ever had. I mean, you can see them all. These are huge tankers. So as that starts to work its way out, which we thought would probably be done by now, but I think over the next 6-8 months, it'll probably start to work its way. I think you're going to see some of those prices come back down, which should help with inflation, but there's obviously other inflationary things out there too. So,
yeah, and we're not the only country that's dealing with inflation issues and supply chain issues. It's all over the world. All right. Rod says, are houseboats, modular, mobile and modular homes becoming popular in California, or are they looked down upon? He wants to know what the perspective of these type of homes are in California.
So houseboats, I'm not really familiar with in my market. I know in some of, if you get out towards the lakes, the big lakes in California, a little more popular out there. And I don't actually know if anybody's actually living on these or if they're more vacation, like, I go spend the week out there with my family and that sort of thing. So I can't really chat on that. In my market, we have several manufactured home parks, modular, however you want to put them. And these are all leased land. So you don't own any of the land. Well, not any, most of them, you don't own the land. So you're literally buying the property, the structure, if you will, and then you're paying a land lease every single month. Some of these, the structure, again, some of you guys are going to be shocked by this, can run $200,000 to $400,000 depending on the area that they're in, and then they're also paying $1,800 to $2,200-$2,300 a month to lease the land. So I think more people are considering them because of where house prices have gone. In fact, I had somebody call me last week on them. I don't personally do a lot of them. They're a different type of property, and you got to more or less be familiar with it. They're a little harder to finance. I'm only aware of 2 banks here in California that do them, and you need, a bigger down payment. You can't get in with the smaller, the 10% downs out here in Southern California. For the most part, you need 20-25% down in many of these. So I think while a lot of people would consider them, a large majority of the people that want to consider them don't actually have the means available to purchase them, because they actually require, in many cases, more money down than it would to buy a single family residence because of the down payment requirements. So
little news on this. Joe Biden is opening up a lot more property that you normally wouldn't be zoned for or allow for manufactured homes. He's working with a lot of the states to open up land that would be considered agriculture and turn it into residential lots, so people can put in manufactured housing. A modular home and a mobile home are 2 different things. So a modular home is actually a stick-built home,
right?
Yeah, a pre-built home that is built on the site. So it's put together much like Legos are. A mobile home is usually a single wide, double wide, or triple wide, and they're brought in sections. The whole thing's made in a factory and brought together. 2 totally different products. they're really popular here. Manufactured housing has come a long way, and they have to now, in the next 3 years, they're going to meet, they're going to exceed a lot of green building standards that you would see in traditional home building. So they're probably going to be the most green product that's out on the market in the next few years, which is going to be really interested to see how this shakes things up. So who knows? It's a proposal.
Yeah. Land is the issue here, right? So
Right.
land where I am is the issue. So if you're buying modular, manufactured, whatever it is, you're essentially more or less putting it in a park, so to speak, because there's no available land to do it otherwise, at least here where I am. Now, if you go more towards the desert and that sort of thing, there's more land. But what you are seeing is some of these boxable type properties, that are, I don't know the company, right? I'm just saying that the style, right? You know that, but being used like for ADUs and that sort of thing, right? So accessory dwelling units, so like second units on property, because now here in California, you can have those on your property. You don't really need any permits and what have you in order to do it. And they allow for, additional rents. They allow for mother-in-law suites. They allow for that sort of thing. So that's more popular than I think going towards, the manufactured or what have you at the moment, at least what I see.
Yes. I have to tell you one thing because it was really funny. I put out a video and I said AUDs instead of ADUs. And I was like, I already put it out to the masses. I was like, well, let's see who catches it. Didn't take, but like literally the video was out for an hour and somebody says AUDs. I'm like, it was I messed up,
Trust me, I've had many of those.
Yeah.
And then you wonder, should I take this down or do I just leave it?
Yeah, I was like, whatever. It's, exactly. I'm a human being. Lawnmower says, question, does a VA appraisal lock the seller into the appraisal for the specific time period?
Does a VA appraiser lock the seller into an appraisal for it? Does if that buyer uses VA again, right? So if you're getting an FHA or a VA loan, there's a case number involved with that appraisal, with that loan or what have you. So if that buyer that was going to buy your property using a VA loan got an appraisal, that appraisal essentially travels with that property. I think it's for 90 days.
I think that's only with FHA.
I think it's VA as well. Yeah, it has a case number. So FHA and VA both have a case number that are associated with that appraisal, and that appraisal travels. I'm almost certain. So
okay, I'll have to double check on that.
I've been wrong many times. My wife will attest to that. But
because I was just like I talked to VA finance people, and they said that the appraisal for the VA for that follows the soldier, not the property.
Okay, so VA. a quick Google. The appraisal will stay with the property for a period of time. However, this is not the case with the conventional loan. So FHA and VA loans, the appraisal will stay with the property. I believe it's 90 days. So
yeah, it's 3 months. Yep,
yeah.
That's exactly right. I got a match with a real estate agent about that before, because she was like, well, we're just going to put it back on the market. And I'm like, until you get another FHA buyer coming in.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, I just had one, in fact. I was the listing agent, and we had an FHA loan came through. We accepted it. They got the appraisal done. It appraised. The buyer got cold feet and backed out. And then the next buyer coming in was worried about the appraisal. And I told their agent, I said, listen, the appraisal's already done. It's already in a value. There's essentially nothing to concern yourself with. It's there. And so that was FHA in this case, but I know VA works very similar. So.
All right. Well, I was told wrong, because I just had this conversation, because I was like, I said what you said, and he was like, no, it follows the soldier. It doesn't follow the helm. And I was like,
yeah, no. Yeah. I mean, yeah, no. It's the case number is associated with with that property. Yep.
All right. That makes sense. Paul Danette says, questions. Could a business that is formed to build tiny houses and put them in a community be a help to many homeless people off the streets in cities like LA? Oh, there's homeless tiny houses all over the place. Austin, Texas is probably one of the most successful one I've ever seen. I think it's Loaves of Love or Loves of Loaves. And they actually, in order to live there, you actually either A, have to have a job, or B, work on the property itself. And then they even grow their own food. And they have tiny home communities all through California for the homeless. I think they just opened one of the major parks, correct? One of the major public parks.
Potentially. Honestly, I haven't seen anything on it. I don't really follow. I don't follow the news at all, right? So I don't watch any news. I just read whatever it is that I want to read, right? So I haven't seen anything on them doing that in a park, but very well could be the case. But again, to go back to her question, yes, that could absolutely be a solution to help get homeless off the street. Again, the problem you have here in Southern California is land. So the nearest place in order to do this would be somewhere far distant from probably LA. And then once you do that, it's how do you figure, how does that help the people that are actually downtown in LA? And you and I were talking about before this, it's become such a problem in Los Angeles that, I mean, it is far beyond anything that my level of thinking can figure out. When you come through downtown LA now, and see just and not just off the freeways, but downtown, like on the city streets, how they've encompassed an entire block. It's become like a community. I don't know how you, first off, I don't know how you ever let it get to that. And secondly, I don't know how you solve it, because it's not like it's one block. We're talking, tens of blocks, hundreds of blocks in some cases. And this is, I don't know what the actual number is with regards to a population, but it's sizable for sure. So,
do you know if there's any kind of community outreach programs that work with the local dioceses and churches that help the homeless?
I'm sure downtown, right? I'm far enough removed from LA that I don't actually know what's happening in LA, to for the most part, right? I'm about 45 minutes, 30 minutes south of LA. So I'm sure there are outreach programs. I'm sure there are different facilities to help, and for sleep and bathing and all that stuff. I mean, here in Huntington Beach, we built one, right? So it's one of these massive tents. It's right off Beach Boulevard, so one of the main streets that run through Huntington, right? And we're a town of about 210,000 people or so. And I don't know how many people this thing sleeps, but they built it about a year and a half ago. I'll drive by it on Beach Boulevard now, and there's people actually sleeping outside of it on the street. So I don't know if these are people that aren't allowed to go in because, they're maybe intoxicated. Yeah, there's something going on that doesn't allow them in, because I don't think it's full. And then even then I'll see people that are 5-10 miles away from it in the same city. And I just don't know, one thing isn't going to fix the problem. There's so many different levels of it. And
just like everything,
again, it's just way beyond, my level of thinking with regards to being able to figure that out.
I will say that, believe it or not, real estate agents are the ones that started a lot of these tiny home communities to help the homeless throughout the United States. So it is a model that can work. It's just like in California, it's where do you find the land and make it work? So Eddie's going to pull up another question.
All right.
Question 2: could very small tiny homes for families with children be allowed until this problem passes?
I don't think they discriminate, right? I'm not sure that there's any discrimination with regards to the homeless. I don't think they can.
They separate. They do separate families, though. They put single men over here. They put families over here, and then they put single women over here. They do separate it.
But if you're a family, they're not going to separate people with kids that sort of thing. So
they have sections like the tiny home community that we're talking about here in Baton Rouge. We're still it's so much red tape, but that's what we're doing. It's like a 3-prong kind of thing. Like the single men are over here, single women over here, and then families are over here. And then they're looking at like a community shower area and everything. So you got to you have to do that. You have to separate it all out just to work with everybody, give everybody a chance.
Yep.
Eddie, there we go. Floyd said, Zill playing games with the housing market too. Oh, so true. So true. I don't know if you saw.
So I did a video on this on Friday after I watched.
Ahead.
Yeah, no. So I talk. So here's the thing. I watched. If you haven't seen the original video, right? Sean Gaston, I think is the guy's name or something like that. It was on TikTok. Did a video, a little viral thing, went viral, and I watched it and I was like, you know what? Like,
he's right.
Conspiracy theory or not, there might be some truth to this. And so I've been talking for the last handful of months about potential scenarios where I've been in the case of talking to people about listing property and or agents I know listing property. And we say what the property's worth. In this case, let's just use some examples that are real and say, hey, I think your house is worth about $340,000 based on comparables. And then Zillow comes in and says, we'll make you a cash offer today. Same person for $385,000. You're like, oh, 45. Like, how's that make any sense? And there's nothing out there to prove it. And so you start wondering, like, why would they overpay for a property? Like, how does that make any sense to anyone? It's really nice for the seller, but how does that make sense for the buyer? And in this case, it was a relocation situation. So they were actually going to lose relocation benefits if they took the offer. So they ended up not doing it. And nevertheless, it got me thinking. And then I network with a lot of real estate agents across the country and hear similar scenarios, people paying $100,000, $150,000 more than the asking price. And so what he talks about in this video is that the idea that they're out there buying property and they buy so many properties, and he uses, say they buy 30 properties in a specific area, for example, and they might pay market value for those properties. So in this case, they might pay $340 in the examples that I use, or somewhere around that number. And then occasionally they'll do one that's higher, $385 or $400 or whatever the number is. And why? And the question is because, or the reason he believes that to happen is because they might be changing values in that area by coming in with a higher comparable. So I can't say whether or not that's actually happening or not, but the idea is that one new comparable in that market now changes the value of all the other properties in that market. And, there's some potential truth to that. So I don't know. Kristina, you could talk more about your market. I mean, I think there's something to be said for sure, because they're in many cases paying more for property than I, as a real estate agent, think it's worth. So,
right. So everybody that I've ever talked to said, I got this offer from Zillow. And like you said, was, my house, I have it listed for $350. I've had some buyers, but Zillow's offering me $385. So one of the things that they have been doing is that, they'll go ahead and accept the $385 and see what happens from there. Then all of a sudden Zillow requests a bunch of stuff. So that ends up being the $350, if not even less. And you're like, and they're, in some cases, they're betting on the fact that you're just like, well, at least it's under contract. I'll just go ahead and take the less amount.
Right.
But in other cases, they're getting the $385. So it's basically what Zillow, what this guy was saying, is that Zillow's trying to manipulate the market in a way that they're holding onto these properties, intentionally increasing the value of several homes in the area. So when they purchase other ones, they can go ahead and flip them for a lot more money. So They just hold on to several of them. And the CEO of Redfin said that they have lots of homes that are sitting there vacant that cannot be put back on the market because they don't have enough construction workers to flip the houses. So it makes sense to me, if they're having this supply of homes that they're trying to flip or get rented and they're sitting there vacant, it would behoove them to increase the value. So that way, when they do get them fixed up, they can increase the value.
No.
It was interesting.
No, it is. And what is really interesting is that he never named, and he goes on to talk about the artificial intelligence they use and how they know what you're looking for with regards to price and what communities you're looking in. So they know which communities to buy in because they know where people are looking to buy. And so there's a lot to be said there, but what was interesting is he puts that out and within 24 hours, he's got a response. He never mentions a company.
Right.
He's got a response from two of the biggest iBuyers out there, which is Zillow and Redfin, or Zillow and whoever the other one was. Yes. Coming out basically defending themselves when he never actually named them.
Never said their names.
So, I mean, I think a lot of people knew, right? I mean, obviously I knew who he was talking about, but a lot of people didn't, because people commented to me going, who's he talking about? I'm like, it's pretty obvious, but yeah, I don't know. It's eye-opening because I never thought of it that way. And so all he did in this whole entire video, all he did was give a scenario. If there was a big company that was buying up homes, that holding on to those homes to increase the value, what would be the reason? He never, like he said, never said the company, but everybody knew who it was. And you're doing something right, or you hit a nerve Oh,
when
absolutely.
those companies decided they needed to respond. And of course, they downplayed it and then took a bunch of real estate agents saying, "Oh, that's not true." I'm like, who are these real estate agents? Because I can't find them. I'm like looking for their names. Like, how is it that this person's a real estate expert, but they don't have their name on Google? Who is this person? Did they just get their license because they're not on the Google webs?
Yeah, he claimed to be an agent for 11 years. So, and at this
Yeah.
point, I think he's probably been on every major syndication across the US based on how the traction that thing got. When I last saw it, I think it was over 1 million views in
Oh yeah.
in like a
Yeah.
short period of time. So
I got it. Then my husband sent it to me. I'm like, I saw this. I reached out to him because I wanted him on. I wanted him on here. I'm like, I do a live stream. I want to talk to you. My people would love this. He didn't respond. He's a busy man now.
yeah, he's probably got about 1,000 of those at the moment.
Yeah. All right. Eddie found the TikTok. You guys want to see it? Rick, no, that's all right. Rick said, question, 200 and 250,000 down on a 650,000 K house with a VA loan, competitive. Also qualify for conventional, but VA rates are better. Why are VA loans looked down upon? Your thoughts. Thank you. Why do you think that VA loans are looked down upon?
So I'll answer the first question or not. Yeah, competitive, definitely competitive. $200,000 to $250,000 down on a 650 house. I mean, that's 30%, more than 30%. So yeah, that's a solid loan in my opinion.
Right.
VA rates are absolutely better. And I would tell you, if you can use VA, you should absolutely use it for that reason. No mortgage insurance. It looks like in this case, because you have the large down payment, mortgage insurance wouldn't be a problem anyway. So I would tell you, talk to your mortgage professional, have them put the numbers side by side, because in VA, unless you're fully disabled, you're going to pay a funding fee, right? Which is going to go on top of your loan amount. And so that's money that you don't need to pay on a conventional loan. So, which is going to raise your loan amount on that VA loan. But if you are disabled or fully disabled, that funding fee is gone. So it could be a really beneficial deal in that case. But if not, have the numbers side by side. You'll be able to tell really, really easily which is the better scenario. Secondly, why are VA loans looked down upon? Because a lot of people think that because in this case, you're putting money down, so it shouldn't really be a big deal. But a lot of times people put zero down when doing VA, right? And so a seller a lot of times thinks if you're putting zero money down, that essentially you're not really qualified to buy a house. You don't have enough money. Maybe you don't have money in the bank because you're doing 0% financing, which is actually not true in many cases. People are just taking advantage of their benefits and doing VA. And the other thing comes down to an appraisal, right? There's the amendatory clause with regards to VA, which means if a property doesn't appraise, you don't have to move forward with a VA loan, even if you've released your appraisal contingency as part of that offer. That amendatory clause, in my understanding, actually supersedes what you put in the contract. So even if you've said I'm waiving the appraisal, if it doesn't appraise, you can use that amendatory clause to back out, and that might be another reason that sellers look down upon it. But
I know another reason too.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Well, some listing agents don't understand that the VA process, how it works, and there is a VA inspection of the home. And so they're like, I don't even want to go through that whole process of having some VA inspector saying, in order for them to buy this house, the sellers have to fix these things, because with a standard inspection with a home, there's certain things that need to be repaired. It's a negotiation thing. But if the buyer is a VA using a VA loan, the sellers have to fix those things in order for that person to purchase it. And the listing agent's like, I don't want to deal with that. They also think that the process of getting it closed is going to be a lengthy process and it takes too long. And so they're like, no, you don't want to do this. Instead of closing in 30 days, it's going to close in 45 days. I've already dealt with VA. Don't do it. And matter of fact, they'll even go on the listing and say this home does not qualify for VA, even though the home probably does, because they don't want to have to deal with it. So sometimes it's just people just not knowing what
lack of experience,
just not knowing. And they're just like, I don't want to deal with it. But I don't think it's any difference. Money is money.
As a listing agent, if you're getting a loan in your VA, or if you're trying to buy in the house in your VA as opposed to someone else, I will tell you, in my experience, a lot of sellers, if you're comparable with regards to the price and the terms, a lot of people really want to help veterans get into property. So just make sure they are aware of your service and I know that buyer letters are not permitted in some markets at the moment, but there's ways to let them know. And I think that's important because it could help you, have a leg up.
Now, on your purchase agreement in California, like here in Louisiana, it states what
Yep,
kind of loan that it literally like highlights.
No, it does. You're supposed to put VA on there or whatever, but I will tell you that the majority of people that fill out a contract incorrectly here in California is very high. There's so many things wrong on these purchase agreements. So I wouldn't count on the information's only as good as the person that input it. So I wouldn't rely on that solely to tell you whether it's a VA or not.
And I'm going to tell you right now, that is one of the things that always is super important when you're dealing with a buyer's agent. Ask them how well do they know the purchase agreement, and if they seem like they don't even know what they're just kind of bumbling through. I know it really well. I filled it out a few times. No. The purchase agreement in itself is a contract. It has a lot of legal words in there. It's also a way to protect you as a buyer exponentially. Yep. So you need to have a listing agent, a buyer's agent that understands that contract better than anybody else, that understands every single paragraph. So that way, if there is a problem, they can get you out of that contract. If you're just having somebody fill in lines, that's just a secretary. But if you have a proper buyer's agent, they know that contract inside and out, and that's who you really want to hire. I just want to
and here in the state of California, ours is about to change again. Changes about every 2 to 3 years because of legalese changing and lawsuits and everything else. And we're currently at 12 pages, I think 12 pages.
When I started with real estate, it was 2 pages long, front and back. Then it was 4, then it was 6. And I think we're at 15 pages now.
Okay. Yeah. So I can't believe you're more than us. So we're at 12. So who knows where we're going to be after. I haven't seen the new one yet. I know there's classes out there going over it. I'm actually signed up to take one here soon, but I'm sure it's
they change them every year.
Yeah.
They change them every year. They change some verbiage and everything else. Yeah. Go ahead, Eddie, and put up another question if you could, please. Casey says, question, will Las Vegas and surrounding areas die off after the water is gone in 10 years? Do you have a crystal
ball? Where's the water going?
All the water is going to disappear in Las Vegas?
I don't know. I don't know anything about that.
That sounds sus, as my kids would say. That sounds very sus.
Listen, there's enough money in Las Vegas for them to figure out a solution to water. Let's just keep it at that. They're not going to let Las Vegas die because of a lack of water. There's enough money and enough billionaires being generated from the hotel business that they'll figure out a solution. I can assure you of that.
I call Las Vegas the paper mache city because everything is it's fake. Venice, fake. It's the paper mache city.
Like China.
Yeah, just like China. Yeah. Question: if big tech companies delay back to office, what would be the impact on Bay Area housing market? Thanks. If big tech's delayed back to office,
I think a lot of them have delayed it, right? I mean, you've got, I think Google and those guys are at least until January at the moment. Some of them are even further. So I think a lot of them are already pushed out until 2022. What effect does it have delaying? I don't know that I don't think it makes it any crazier. I mean, that market's already crazy. I think a lot of people that are, I think a lot of these companies are going to have some form of hybrid work anyhow. So it's not going to be in the office every single day. So I think a lot of people that have moved or are planning to move will still do their thing. And the people that, are wanting to live in the city or not wanting, I don't know that it's going to change much. I think a lot of that migration pattern because of the pandemic has already shifted for the most part.
I know that a lot of offices have adopted a hybrid models that, yes, you come in, but you're only coming in, so many days a week. So if you went in 2 days a week last week, you're going to come in 3 days a week next week. And it rotates out. So you don't have as many people in the office, which is actually kind of good first of all, it's good for the environment. It's actually good for the company's bottom line too, because they're not having to run as much electricity. So I think the hybrid model is going to be here to stay. I don't necessarily think it's going to affect the housing market anytime soon. That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, the Bay Area, again, it comes down to supply and demand. right? I mean,
Mhm.
it's built out. There's nowhere to go. So what happens when you can't buy in the Bay Area because prices have increased to whatever levels? Well, you got people starting to go out to Sacramento and to different markets that are hour and a half outside of the city. And so I
Mhm.
think that's more of what you see versus, say, in the Bay Area itself. I mean, there's a lot of people that want to live in the city, willing buyers, but there's not a lot of able buyers just because they don't have the financing to be able to afford it.
Mhm. Eddie, want to put up another question there? Da-da-da. Eddie said, go ahead and hit that thumbs up. Yeah, if you're
Yes.
liking what you hear today, go ahead and give us a little thumbs up for Jeb here. Shannon S says, is it worth it to build a house or continue to rent in the Bay Area? If you if you will be paying for likely 33 plus years loan on a US rural loan. I don't understand the question. Is it worth to build a house or continue to rent in the Bay Area if you will be paying for likely 33 plus years on a loan
Okay, so
on
yeah, so I think she's saying, should you continue to rent in the Bay Area or go out and build a house that's basically going to take our 33 plus years to repay?
wow, build a
And I
house.
would say you got to do what's. I mean, again, I'm sure you have an answer for this. My
Uh-huh.
go-to answer is you got to do what's right for you. I mean, it's not everybody is meant to be a homeowner, right? It's just whatever is right in your life. If financially you can't afford to pay whatever the mortgage is, and you're a renter, then that's the situation for you. I mean, it's to each his own to some extent. Moving outside to a rural area, how does that affect your commute into the city? If you live in the Bay Area, is that something you
Right.
want to do every
Traffic.
day? How does that payment compare to what you're renting? You've got to figure out what's right for you. I don't think there's a one size fits all answer.
Right. And if you're planning on only living in the house for 3 years, don't buy.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
like
Agreed.
don't
And that
buy.
doesn't matter what market you're in,
It doesn't
right? I
matter
mean,
what market you're in.
yeah,
Don't buy if you're planning on buying a house and moving in 3 years. That's not
I guess
smart
the average
financial
homeowner now
decision.
is 11 years is the last thing I
Do you
read.
remember when it was 7 years? It used to be
Yeah,
7
7.
years.
Now
It
it's
was
11. And it's probably
yeah.
going to be longer because of how low rates are. People's payments are going to be super low.
Yeah, there was a lot of refinancing, so people were like, "We're just gonna go ahead and stay." Question: what state do you think is the best to seniors in regarding property tax? I actually did a video on this. I can't remember the top of my head. It's been several months ago, about, the top states. So Florida, they say, is
There you
good in
go.
property taxes, but I don't believe that. I think that's horse bucky. I'm not gonna lie. Like, honestly, my parents paid a ridiculous amount in property taxes in Florida, but
South
South Dakota.
Dakota. There you go.
South
South
Dakota.
Dakota.
In addition to the no state income tax, seniors residing in South Dakota can apply for the state's property relief programs.
Interesting.
South Dakotians older than 70 can get homestead exemption, allowing them to delay paying property taxes until the home is sold. How about that? They probably just take
Interesting.
the equity
Yeah.
out at closing, during
Yeah.
a settlement.
Some sort of agreement at the end. It's like a
Wow.
lien on title, probably.
Yeah, I don't remember that being on my list. Oh, there was other factors of what the best states were to live in, when you're about to retire, and it wasn't just the property taxes.
Yeah, I was
I
going
had
to
to do.
guess Florida just because I don't know what other states' stance is on property taxes, but I knew Florida
Mhm.
was pretty forgiving with, if you will, with regards to state tax and everything else. So I was going to say Florida, but here you are. Yeah,
Yeah, I lived in Florida. Our property
but
tax
property
was
tax
higher
can be
there.
outrageous depending on it. Like if you're down in like the South Florida area, I mean, property taxes are upwards of 2% in some of those markets just because of the hurricane and everything else factored into that.
That's exactly what
Yeah,
happened. So
and
every
your
time they have
insurance
a
is nuts.
yeah, and then they can decide not to pay your like, all of a sudden, they're like I'm not joking, State Farm out of the blue said, "You know what? We're not gonna do homeowners insurance anymore. We'll gladly take your cars, but we're not gonna do homeowners insurance anymore." And the state of Florida is like, well, guess what? If you're not going to cover people's homes, we're not going to let you cover cars anymore. And they're like, well, we changed our mind. But what they did was they hiked up their insurance rates so much that you didn't want them, but you went ahead and kept it with their cars. So I was like, no more State Farm for me in
You
Florida.
probably have a little bit of that in Louisiana where you are, right? People like
No,
no
no.
because of the hurricane. No,
They do give a like a whenever we have a something that happens like this, they do add it to the property taxes, the hurricane fees and stuff like that. But we've done it for so long. We have a system down of
right?
how this works. So, we get a fee from like water and electricity. we get the hurricane fee. And
I
they're
got
like,
you.
oh, well, I will drop off in a few years. And they're hoping that nobody notices. And they're like, hey, we're still paying this fee from Katrina since we had Ida. Can we just go ahead and, oh, yeah, no problem. They just keep the fee on there.
Yeah, just roll it over.
Yeah, just roll it over. They're sneaky like that. Well, Jeb, I know that you have you have to get to an appointment, and I just want to thank you for spending today with me. But Jeb, I want to tell you something. Next weekend, I'm going to be in your area. I'm going to be in California, but that doesn't mean the show is not going to be here. My husband and several other real estate agents throughout the country are going to be answering your questions right here. So if no matter where you are in the United States, there's going to be a real estate agent. I won't have 50 real estate agents on there. That would be a headache. But there's going to be a bunch of real estate agents from around the country that are coming on here to answer your questions live. Eddie's going to be the moderator. So you guys actually get to see the man behind the scenes, Mr.
Very
Eddie
cool.
Smallhorn.
Look at that. I
Eddie,
like
the
it.
producer. Yeah. So make sure that you guys tune in next weekend, next Sunday, when Eddie is handling up on this. So everybody, I hope you have a fantastic week. I hope we answered all your questions. If we did not, go ahead and after this is published, put in the comment section your questions about real estate. I will try to answer them on my way to California because I am leaving tomorrow. And if you haven't yet, go over to Jeb Smith. He's got fantastic information about the real estate market, not just in California, just the real estate market as a whole. So go over there, check him out, man. Look, he's got great content. Check out his thumbnail. He's even got one. Look at that. It's upside down. That's some good stuff.
Hey, I'm floating upside down. Who can do that?
Yeah, I don't know. The wizardry. I mean, you're a phenom. You're a phenom.
Hardly.
All right, everybody. Have a fantastic week, and we will see you next week.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Adios.